Hi, Pastor Greg. How are
Hey,
you doing?
it's Akani. I'm doing well. Thank you for
It's.
having me.
I was literally just saying to you, how good it is to be in your counseling room, and I don't need counseling.
It's a
It's a
totally different context today.
different feeling. So this is. I kind of feel like a fish out of water today. Yeah. I guess that sort of links into what we're talking about today,
Mm,
and that's identity. And a lot of the stuff that we've spoken about in this room
yeah.
has been around identity and my own identity struggles, which I didn't know I even had. And I remember the penny dropping the one time on one of our calls, and I just like started bawling my eyes out. And you're like, oh, so now you realize what I've been saying to you this whole time. So it's really good to have you and
Yeah.
to speak about it from this angle and not really having fully overcome, but still trusting the Lord
Yeah.
to guide me through it and grow more in my identity. So, yeah, to kick things off, I just would like to maybe have you introduce yourself. And
Sure.
yeah, maybe you can start off by defining what identity is to
Yeah.
you.
Well, I'm Greg. I'm a pastor here at Every Nation Rosebank and have been for the last 15 years.
Yeah.
I'm a counselor as well, trained Christian counselor. And so identity is something I end up talking about a lot.
Mm.
And yeah, in my early 20s, I think I also really had an identity crisis, even though we didn't have the kind of social media pressure and stuff. Yeah,
Sure.
trying to figure out who you are, who you want to be, who you should be is a big part of life. And especially for young people growing up.
Yeah.
The good news is your 20s are about, right, discovering who you are. And if you're
Yeah.
going to mess it up, then it's best you do it in your 20s, right? Because you can still fix it.
The world has not told us that because the idea is we are expected to know by now and to have it all figured out.
Absolutely. And I mean, it's something I picked up with millennials as I was counseling, was that phrase, by now I should.
Mm.
And eventually I started asking people, by now you should what? What
Mm.
is this book, By Now You Should? I want to know. I can't find it, and I am not finding an author for it. And there is this pressure on us, by now we should.
Mm.
And definitely your 20s might be your most significant years because you're learning the most.
Sure.
There definitely shouldn't be a time where you just party and go to Bali and you should be studying in your 20s, but you should also be exploring. Like
Yeah.
studying feels like this massive commitment, but you don't really know who you are. But getting something behind your name is so useful. So study for those 4 or 5 years, get it behind your name, and then you can decide.
Yeah.
Because now you've got some
No,
experience.
definitely, definitely. So, how would you define identity from your perspective?
Well, as Christians, what we know for sure is that we don't get to choose our identity. And I think that's a massive thing for, especially Gen Z these days to accept, for millennials, for
Yeah.
everybody, because we think we should figure ourselves out and decide what we want to be.
Mm.
But why am I saying that? Because God created you and he created you uniquely,
Sure.
right? I mean, today you can unlock your kitchen door with your retina of your eye or with your thumbprint, right? Because
Yeah.
that's how unique we are.
Mm.
It's almost impossible. In fact, it is impossible to have two of those same things. Like our DNA, if you watch all the crime things, which I love watching, the DNA is so unique that we know
Sure.
you were there,
Mm. Mm.
and so the uniqueness of our creation means that God has put inside of us things that are for us.
Yeah.
And so if we just decide we're going to be something and we go after it, we're most probably going to get frustrated at something.
Yeah.
And there might be a lucky moment where what you wanted to be is actually what you are.
Yeah. Yeah.
But for most of us, the reality of identity is we have to figure out who God is and who we are in him, right? And we are hidden in Christ. That is the beginning of our identity. First of all, I think we're created by God, right? And there's something I love about that is that fingerprint thing comes back in that thing. Because I often talk when I'm preaching and will say this, remember that when God created you, he formed you out of dust,
Sure.
right? And if you've ever touched clay, you know that your fingerprint stays on that clay, right? But also the clay gets a little bit under your fingerprint.
Mm.
And I think that is such a beautiful picture of identity, that you have God's fingerprints all over you.
Sure.
Right? And he thought you up.
Yeah.
He knew you would exist now, this time, this place, this day. And yet we have the audacity then to go, oh, well, you know what I want to be is an astronaut. And I don't think it really depends on the jobs, right? But let's talk about that. Like, all I want to be is an astronaut. And then you discover you've got, I don't know, maybe you've got asthma or a bit of a heart problem, and going to space will literally kill you. And then it's like your whole world falls apart, and now your whole identity, and then who are you? And then you just become a homeless person wandering on the streets taking drugs. That's not how life works, right?
Yeah.
It's good to have dreams. It's good to have desire. It's good to long for things. But then you figure out who you are in the journey.
Yeah.
And so for me, how do we identify identity? Well, who is God and who are you? What did God put inside of you? What is unique that you carry that other people don't? And I think identity encompasses purpose. As a Christian, it encompasses destiny and calling. And maybe we can talk about those things as we go. But I don't know, what do you think about what I'm saying?
So my mind is like running circles right now, because I'm just thinking of, especially in the context of career, and how we've defined our own identities based on what our careers should be, or what we feel we should be doing with our lives. But that's mainly because of the spaces we find ourselves in. And so I have a question around how you feel how we identify sometimes is influenced by our communities and environments, and even the groups we sort of align with or assimilate to. How does that shape how we show up and how we define ourselves from your view?
Look, that's a very good question, because historically identity was communal. Because you would grow up in a group, in a specific space, in a specific time. And it's only very recently that independence, so what's the word I'm looking for? That's not the word. Us figuring ourselves out by ourselves. The word individuality has become a cult, literally, because we all want to be individual. We all want to be unique. And then, as I often joke about as well, is that then we're so unique we all end up with the same tattoo. So that is a new thing. And previously, our identity was our family. What is our surname? What does our family do? And I mean, if you go back even just 100 years, like if you were born to a greengrocer, the chances were you were going to be a greengrocer, and your children and grandchildren would be greengrocers, because I don't even think your generation knows what a greengrocer is. That's
I'm actually wondering.
People who sell fruit and vegetables, a vegetable shop, right?
Yeah.
But the world has changed so much.
Yeah.
And today you can be anything you want to be. And I think this is where the issue comes, because if your job defines you, if your job becomes your identity, you are being defined by an external reality that is super changeable. In our economy, in the way the world is going now.
Absolutely.
How do you pick a career?
Yeah.
My parents, when my dad started working as a appy, he was a bus builder. So not officially a mechanic, but he was good with his hands, and so he learned how to build buses.
Yeah.
From the chassis to the end, right? And his trajectory was, you're going to work for 45 years, you're going to get your gold watch, you're going to retire.
Yeah.
In his lifetime, all of that changed. That wasn't the reality anymore. The same thing with my mom. She was a secretary. She was a typist, and she learned how to organize. And back in the day, there was none of this technology. Everything was analog, right? She literally typed. And it was highly required. Everything needed to be typed. Everything needed to be posted. She organized. And then also, just before she retired, she'd had to move on to word processing, which your generation also doesn't know, but we used to call that on the first computers.
Yeah.
And so the world has changed so much. And so now, how can a job description, even a career, become an identity? Because you don't even know that that's going to last for the next 6 years.
You could get fired. You could
lose your job. The industry AI could take over that industry, and here you are. And so this is why it is a little difficult to give you a true definition of identity. But we can talk about what it isn't and what it is. And what it isn't is a job description. What it isn't is a position. What it isn't is a talent.
Or a relationship.
Or a relationship. Absolutely not. What it isn't is a philosophy.
Yeah.
Because all of those things are changeable.
Sure.
But who you are stays the same. And you can grow, you can add things will subtract, Yeah. I think maybe one of the ways to talk about it is to, maybe what I can do is define purpose versus calling versus destiny, that kind of thing. Because I think the church has also not done a particularly good job, in my view, of, because I used to be confused about all of those things.
Yeah.
So let's start with calling, because I feel like it's the overarching thing. And so you were created by the Lord to exist in a specific time, in a specific place, with free will to make choices. I believe that when you were created, your natural spiritual gifts are in there, your natural physical abilities are in there, your passions, your desires are already in there. Yeah. And when we watch childhood development, we can see how kids tend to think.
Yeah.
And the beauty of being human is things that we might be exposed to, stuff we didn't know about, and that can then become something that's valuable in our life that also then begins to form us, right? Yeah. Obviously, salvation is one of the most important moments that will form us.
Yeah.
And so when we talk about Christian purpose, there's really, and calling, there's kind of two. There's a general calling and a general purpose, which is, if we say Jesus Christ is Lord, the Bible makes it clear about how we should act and what our priorities should be.
Yeah.
Jesus first,
yeah.
Marriage second, family, then our careers and jobs. But in that should be all those commands to witness and evangelize, to love each other, to do good for each other, to care for each other, right? We become part of a family. And I guess this is the problem for modern Christians and identity is, okay, like I said, previously we were defined by the group, now we're all individual. Then we become Christians, and what happens? We're part of a group. And so there's a common purpose for all of us, to serve God, to be part of a church, to grow in our understanding of the Word of God, right? But then there are unique things that God has put in us.
Recently, more specific to a person.
Yes, that are specifically for you. Yeah. And I think a big thing for me to talk about is, and maybe in Africa, but in many places in the world, if you're a Christian, then full-time ministry is the ultimate. That's the best way to serve God. And that is such a lie. I am called to full-time ministry. I fought it for a season in my life. I've always been a leader in the church, even when I didn't want to be. And I was teased at school about being a Christian, and they called me pastor as a derogatory thing. And that created a thing in me. And so when it became apparent that that was probably what I was going to be, I had to go and deal with a false identity.
Sure.
That I was running away from, because I didn't want to be ridiculed for being right? But all my gifts, all my talents, my passions all lie in the church. I want to help people be better Christians, and know how to serve the Lord. And I want to help them in that. And so there's a leadership gift in my life, but its most natural outworking is going to be the church. But for other people, they've got leadership gifts. They've got unique gifts that they need to innovate in medicine. They need to innovate in finance. They need to innovate in climate betterment and what's eco stuff, because the world needs to get fixed, or whatever, or business or money. So we need apostles and prophets and teachers in those places. Yeah. And so the best place for you is the thing that makes your heart come alive.
Sure.
And we can go look around and see things, but eventually we have to decide that's the thing. And for me, when I got ordained, it was like quite a psychological moment, because I was like, hold on, I am a pastor. People are going to call me pastor, but it's not derogatory anymore. It's an honorific title. I mean, what I really am is just a child of God. And I honestly believe that's the highest title any of us will do. God has never called anybody Pastor John or Pastor, he just calls me Greg and calls you Tsakani, and that's it. Because he knows who we are.
Yeah.
And the pastor isn't a job title. It's about a collection of gifts that allow me to minister to people.
That's literally all it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So can you tell us more about how you dealt with your struggle with identity, especially?
Yeah, so I think I was talking about calling. And so I'm beginning to understand, because for me, purpose, calling, destiny was all one thing, and that gets ridiculous. So let's define those words. So for me, calling is the overarching one. And what calling is the totality of your life.
Yeah.
Every Christian, forget it, every person on this planet is called to know God, because there's only one creator.
Yeah.
He didn't create saved people and unsaved people. He just created people.
Yeah.
And then called all of us and said, come. I'm your God, come. He gave us free will, and so we can choose to or not to. And the people who choose not to, we know there isn't lightning coming out of the sky striking people dead, because they're allowed. They have free will. And I believe God honors our free will more than we do, which I think is important in this conversation.
Yeah.
because we want to make God responsible for a whole lot of things that he's given us responsibility for.
Yeah.
I can't remember. I always get confused. It's either Psalm 15 verse 16 or Psalm 16 verse 15. But it says this. It says, the highest heavens belong to God, but the earth he has given to man. And that's a summary of Genesis. It's a summary of what we call the dominion mandate, where God gave the earth to us to steward. That's why it looks like it does. Because that's how we have chosen to steward this world, right? It's a mess because we're not doing a good job. We're not holding that responsibility. Heaven is perfect. Why? Because that belongs to God, and God is doing a spectacular job. So calling is the totality of my life. I'm alive now. That's part of my calling. I'm a man. You're a woman. I have passions, I have had experiences, everything that happens in my life is part of my calling. Now, I don't know whether it's predestined or not. God knows what's going to happen. He knows the end from the beginning. Doesn't mean he ordained it that way. And if we have different theology, that's okay. But the point of calling is this. It is overarching. It is the totality of my life. It then includes every choice I make. Marriage is a choice. God doesn't give you a marriage partner. You go find one. Marriage is the most human thing. We want to super spiritualize it. And yes, it is a picture of Christ in the church. That is what is spiritual about it. What jobs we choose where to live. We choose how many children we're going to have, right? Whether or not we have children, whether we're struggling to have children. So if your leg falls off, that becomes a part of your calling. Once you recover from that, you'll figure out how to live. And we watch. People are resilient. People are amazing.
Yeah.
We hate suffering, but it's definitely part of the Christian calling, whether you like it or not. Because without suffering, how are we formed? Jesus suffered. How are we going to be exempt? Yeah. And so if you think of calling, it's everything in your life. And it's partly your responsibility and then partly God. It's this partnership between God and I, because I get to make choices. And this is important as well, because if all we're doing is, God, what am I here for? What did you make me? Well, then you're giving away responsibility that God gave you. If God gives you delegated responsibility and you're trying to give it back to him, that's when we get frustrated.
Yes.
That's when we feel like our prayers aren't being answered.
That frustration can really do a number on a person.
It absolutely can.
I'm just thinking of what you said about doing things that bring our hearts alive, make our hearts, just beat with joy. Especially in the context of having tried to run away from the pastoral calling that you have. How did you figure out at some point that I'm frustrated about this, but it's the one thing that gives me so much joy that when I'm doing it, my heart is literally doing a dance? And how do you reconcile that? Because someone struggling with their identity right now might not know that the one thing that they're running away from is actually the thing that will give them the most joy. And how do you get to a place where you start to realize that?
Yeah. So you're actually reminding me of things. So in my early 20s, I developed a passion for music. It wasn't part of my life. I was a singer. I sang in the choir. That was my music. And I loved it. I loved the singing. I loved music. Always did. But it never entered my head I could actually play it. It seemed like something. And in my teens, some of my friends started picking up guitar, and then they couldn't sing, so they'd come and say, "Oh, come, I'll play, you sing." That's how we make music. And then from that, I really sort of started thinking, "Oh, maybe I can play the guitar." And then a friend of mine said, "Yeah, just do it," and sort of showed me some chords, and then I was hooked. And this is actually a very relevant story, because I think music is my biggest passion. I play many instruments. In the church band, I played guitar, I played piano, I learned harp. It was a lifelong dream. 17 years ago, I started learning harp. I play percussion, the passion of my life. But the weird thing is, music has never been the major manifestation of my life. Sure. And it has frustrated me. And I guess at 53, I've forgotten a little bit of that journey. So you're reminding me. And so all my ambition was music. I'm going to record albums. I'm going to do this. I'm going to write songs. And I did do some of those things. I have played on professional albums. But it sort of became clear to me that was not going to be the biggest manifestation of my life. At the same time, even from a child, and my mom we were talking about some stuff, and she was telling me about one of my birthday parties, and these memories started coming back where even as a child, I had an affinity with the human soul. I would always seek out the sad person or the child who wasn't and try and include them, right? When I look at my life, even as a teenager, even when I was really screwed up and really struggling and dealing with abuse and all kinds of things, I was able to talk to others and encourage them and make them feel better.
Yeah.
And when I look back now, I gave counsel. I'm sure it was horrific, but it came out of me. And then even in this journey of me really trying to be, and I was a good musician. I am a good musician.
Yeah.
I'm a good singer. People enjoyed my worship. But as much as I wanted it to be the thing, it turned out my care for people, my encouragement, my ability to discern and show compassion and sit with people in difficult positions, in difficult seasons of their life.
Yeah.
It turned out that was more who I am than the music. And so today, what I actually believe is that God gave me music because it pulled me out. It gave me confidence. It showed me I could do something, right? But it was never my purpose. Because a gift and talent can't be a purpose. Because if my hand falls off tomorrow, see, this is identity.
Yeah.
If you cannot be who you are because of a physical outside thing, then you've built your identity in the wrong place. You've chosen identity. You haven't let God reveal to you who you are. And that sounds super spiritual. You know who you are. You know what you're passionate about. You're doing this talk thing because something in you is making you do it, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, you're making me sort of reflect and realize. And so it was very painful. But what happened was one of our pastors hated my worship and didn't want me to do it and would complain continually. And then I had to face facts. And it was a very powerful identity moment because I gave it up. I said goodbye. I lay on the floor. And there's a lot of stuff that happened. But basically what really came out of it is people just, and it wasn't like somebody came and found me or whatever, but just people were like, can I see you? Can I talk to you? Some leaders in the church were saying, look, we're starting a ministry team. You definitely seem to be that person. Started getting training, got interested in counseling, studied psychology, didn't finish my degree, but got my third year in psychology. And that's how I started. And then it turned out that's the thing I'm really, really good at.
Yeah.
And that's what I've done for 30 years. I still play music. And I believe part of why God gave me music, apart from just giving me confidence and giving me real, is that it makes me come alive. It's such a joyful thing for me. And it's part of my debrief process as a pastor. And, if I've had a bad session, I can just go home and play my harp for 15 minutes and I feel better.
Yeah.
And so it's a joy in my life. It's not the greatest expression of my life. But there are many other things that have now come. And so this is calling. So purpose is entirely our job. Purpose is us going, okay, I'm not called to be a musician in the high levels of that. So what am I going to do?
Yeah.
What am I good at?
Yeah.
What burns inside of me? What do I just do naturally? And when I realized that, and for me, it boils down to one thing: encouragement. I do a lot more than that, but that is the moment. I care about people. I'm interested in people. A few years ago, actually in COVID, it was really bad. A friend of mine, they lost their baby 7 months. And it happened right in the middle of COVID, and we were still figuring all of this out. And I didn't realize I was on the phone to him, and of course I wanted to go to him, and he said, "No, you can't come. It's COVID." I can't even go in. His wife had to go in, and this was emergency, and then the baby passed away. And I was just on the phone, and I was with him for a couple of hours, just talking to him, encouraging, crying with him, doing the thing. A pastor friend of mine had come to my office to talk to and had heard what I was saying on the phone. And I didn't realize this, but a week later he came and said, this is what he said. He said, "I can't do what you do." And this is somebody I respect, who I think is one of the most gifted people I've ever met. He said to me, "I can't do what you do." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "I heard you talking." He said, "I was crying. I was traumatized just listening to you. But then I was so amazed at how you held that space for that person."
Sure.
And I'd never used language like that because it just comes out of me. I'm feeling for my friend, but this other person got to see something I did, which is a secret thing. Now I've realized my most glorious moments, there's one other person witnessing it,
Yeah.
But that was a very significant moment in my life around this thing of purpose and identity, because it's something, it's a capacity I have, and I didn't make it. God put it in me, and it's just natural to me. And I think this is one of the reasons we miss our purpose, is because it's so natural to us. We're looking to be impressive. We're looking to change the world. And let's just get honest. The world is not perfect. We're not all going to be great and brilliant. But I'll tell you what, if we embrace what God has put inside of us, we will change somebody's world. We will make a difference in somebody's world. And that's enough. Now, calling also, there are bigger and smaller callings. Let's even go with greater and lesser callings, but none of them are unimportant. And if you're trying to live out somebody else's calling, you are just telling God that yours doesn't matter, right?
Yeah.
And how dare we? But we're also wasting our time. We're frustrating ourselves and we're frustrating other people. And here's the real irony. Even when we're trying to be the other thing, what people are getting from us is the thing we actually have. If I could be this frustrated musician and be all angry and irritated and like, why does God hate me? People around me would still be getting counsel. Not as trained as I am now, but that's what they would be getting from me.
Yeah.
Because I can't help myself.
That's who you are.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So just embrace the thing you are. And then purpose, when we actually embrace our purpose and cherish our purpose, we start putting faith behind our purpose. All I do is encouragement, right? Now, yes, it's more than that. But to me, that's the crux. That's what I'm trying to achieve. And sometimes I sit in this room and I listen to people talk and something comes out of my mouth that they've never heard about themselves.
Sure.
And it just breaks something open. It's glorious. And that's their life. And they walk out of here, maybe they only see me once or twice, but something's changed in their life. They've benefited from me. And that's what purpose is.
Literally. And
there's no glory in it. And there's no identity. My identity isn't how good was I in this room, because that's the other thing.
Yeah.
If your identity, you're going to know your identities in your job when your boss tells you did a bad job and you fall apart. You're going to know your identities in money when the taxman comes and says, now you need to give me the 16 million you didn't pay me, and your world falls apart.
Yeah, sure.
Anything external will eventually end. And what you've got to understand, and I think for young people, it's really hard because you haven't lived as long. 53 years old for me. Percentages have changed. 18 months is incredibly short to me. If you're 23, 18 months is a massive percentage of your life. These things matter because you're going to live till you're 80. Maybe your generation will even be living till they're 100 healthy, the way medical science is, right? And so we've got to calm down a little bit. We've got to put appropriate weight on appropriate things. And I mean, as humans, how do we ever do that? We're never going to get it right, 100%, right? But we can do better. And so purpose is our part. God has put it in us, and then the responsibility for us is to dig it out, to cherish it, and to go for it.
Yeah.
And sometimes job isn't purpose. That isn't the point. We have to make money. We have to eat. Paul says, if you don't make money, you're not going to eat. If you don't work, you're not going to eat. That's what he's saying. As that translates to money, right? But money cannot be our God. Money cannot be a purpose. And I'm telling you right now, making money is a gift. It's not a purpose. If those people who come to me and say, oh, I'm making money for the church, I'm like, no, but you better be serving in that church.
Yeah.
Great, you're giving $1 million, you're building orphanages. Do you know any of those children's names? Because purpose is about people. Purpose only manifests in the context of the next person you meet. If you're just doing things alone, it might be benefiting other people, but there needs to be that human touch. Because the thing God cares most about on this planet is human beings.
Yeah.
And so purpose is exclusively about how you're affecting other people.
That is true.
And if you're not affecting them positively, then you're a psychopath. So go figure that out and do your counseling, take your meds and be better. But for most of us, we get to affect people positively.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking, as you were speaking, it's especially with the harp story, because I'm like, oh my gosh, I know someone in the Bible who played a harp and wasn't called to that. He was actually
David. He was called to be the king. Yeah, exactly. But that was powerful in his life. Yeah, you're right.
Literally, him playing the harp got him to where he needs to be. Right. So it's just an interesting observation that I was making, that he didn't even obsess over playing the harp. He didn't say, oh, this is the only thing I want to do. This is the only thing I can do, and I really am passionate about. He literally just, opened himself up to the opportunity to be king. And that's amazing how it ties in so well to what you're sharing. But I'm just thinking also with how I struggled with identity. And in my struggle, I realize now, as you're speaking, is that when I struggled, it was mainly because I was trying to serve myself. It was more self-serving and a lot of idolatry, because I saw the one thing, particularly my career, as something that could benefit me. I wasn't really thinking about anyone else. I was just thinking, I just need to make money and not live this particular lifestyle that I have. And so I'm realizing how growing out of that and even walking in what I believe God has called me to do, it's more about other people and it's more relational than it it would have been had I just stayed in the mindset I had. And it's just interesting how identity in the wrong thing is actually idolatry.
So good.
And it's, yeah, it
That's a
took me a
very good
while to get here.
definition. Yeah, totally. And that was me in worship. Worship became an idol. And this is what we don't understand. Like prayer can become an idol. Worship can become an
Sure.
idol. Jesus can become an idol if we're not relating to him as a person. Do
Sure.
you understand?
Yeah.
And that can become a false identity. That's what an idol is. It's a false identity. An idol is it's something I go to for comfort, for wisdom, for identity that is easier for me to come to than God.
Yeah.
That's what an idol is.
Yeah.
And we can make every good thing on this planet an idol.
Yeah.
And the thing is not bad. Worship is not bad, right? I had to change my relationship with worship. And what I was doing was being so obsessed by this one person who didn't like my worship and then trying to impress them. Now, is that like totally the antithesis of worship, the complete
Literally.
opposite of worship, right? And that was why I had to stop. And so and again, we might be idolizing our purpose, which is why we're frustrated. And how do we stop doing that? We just go, Lord, this doesn't give me meaning. You give me meaning. And like I always use a stupid thing. I don't know if your generation knows what an iron lung is, but it's in the old days, if some people, if they got paralyzed or whatever, they would get put into this iron thing and it would breathe for them. And so they couldn't do anything. They couldn't move, they just couldn't. And I believe with all my heart is, God forbid you end up in an iron lung. You still have meaning, you still have value, and you still have purpose. And there are movies made. I was watching some movies of these people who wrote books by dictating them to somebody. It's just, we are amazing. God created us amazing and resilient. Yeah. Idolatry will kill us. And so we've got to hold things lightly. My identity is not what I do. My identity isn't the value I have to somebody else, because to God, I have infinite value. Absolutely. Always, forever. I'm allowed to find meaning. That's something I learned 2 or 3 years ago. I remember sitting here and talking to somebody on that couch, and it was difficult, and the Holy Spirit was here between us, and this stuff just started happening, and my skill and my experience played. And when this person left, I just felt so good. And then I was like, oh Lord. And the Holy Spirit said, no, you're allowed to have meaning. That was very meaningful. Sure. When we do good work, we can find some meaning. Yeah. We can say that mattered, but it's not my identity. And literally the next day, it was mediocre. But so you get what I'm saying. It's like that. None of that is my identity. Yeah. Because this world isn't perfect, and I'm not perfect, and we can get better, but we'll falter sometimes. Absolutely. Yeah. And so for me, the bottom line is embracing our purpose. It's in you. You already know what it is. People around you have already told you. What's the most common compliment you've received?
Sure. It's interesting because it's like you were saying how sometimes the one thing people keep pointing out you don't want.
You despise. Yeah.
But it's like, I feel like it's a gift of leadership, because I look back since like daycare days, I've been leading.
Kids wanted you to tell them what to do.
You know what I'm saying? It's like, there we go. I can't run away from it.
There we go. Yeah. And this is, again, the point I made. You might be despising it and hating it. People around you are benefiting from your purpose. Now, how stupid is that?
I know.
Because you can't help yourself. And God created that in you for other people.
Absolutely. But I think also it's this, especially because now you're speaking of perfection, this idea that we have to do things and be perfect. And God is calling us to be excellent, not perfect.
Yeah. And what does excellence mean? What is the biblical definition of excellence?
I haven't thought about it, but I think it would help to know what excellence looks like as opposed to perfection. Because I feel like, especially in this day and age, a lot of us struggle with identity because we're trying to be a perfect image of something.
Spot on.
Or trying to impress that one boss, like you tried with the pastor who was leading you guys when you were singing and doing worship. But we're also trying to do that in the context of identity that isn't even ours. And we're trying to walk it out in perfection, but we're doing so horribly at it because it's not what we're called to do. At the same time, in the same breath, we're still living and breathing out, maybe not as best as we could because we're not in alignment with that identity, but we're still doing what God has imprinted on us,
Yeah.
which is a weird concept.
It
you
really
know?
is, right? So the only person not benefiting from your purpose
It's
is
yourself.
yourself.
Everyone else is, but you.
Spot on.
And that's why I think people are struggling with even mental health issues. 'Cause
Yeah,
it's like,
totally.
why am
I'm nothing. I'm not achieving. It's like, no, darling, you just need to do the thing you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
The things. For me, the definition of biblical excellence is doing the very best you can with what you have.
Sure.
That's it. Because this world isn't perfect.
Yeah.
Since Adam and Eve sinned, and if it wasn't them, it would have been one of us eventually. This world is not perfect. And I think to help you understand what I mean by that means there's not enough time. We were meant to live in our bodies forever. There's not enough time anymore. We are all multi-gifted.
Yeah.
Because God knew who we created, that we would get bored. So if we were going to live in our bodies forever, he made us multi. Now, there's not enough time, there's not enough money, there's not enough opportunity, there's not enough health, there's not enough well-being. This is the imperfect world. God still moves in this imperfect world. And there are great things on this planet, amazing things. And we can even be great and amazing. But we have to embrace that imperfection. And if our goal is perfection, we will kill ourselves. That is what mental health is. I'm not good enough. Well, my darling, maybe you're not, but you're never going to be perfect. Do something good. Be the best you can be with what you have.
Absolutely.
But let all that nonsense go.
Yeah.
And impressing others, comparison. This is the killer of Gen Z. That's by now I should. That's what it means.
Yeah.
And who is controlling you? Other people who don't know you exist, who don't care about you. And can we all just be frank? What has been proven psychologically through testing is nobody thinks more about you than they do about themselves. You're so worried about what other people think. You know, every single person, we're all doing it. And your weird moment on Instagram or when your makeup wasn't, I didn't even see that because I was so freaked out about how I'm perceived. You got to let this stuff go. It kills our purpose. It kills our identity. And so you cannot choose your identity. What is burning in you? Is it super simple? It doesn't matter whether your calling is great or small. And this is hard. I believe, and I don't know that there is biblical proof of this, but I believe there's this moment when we read about the tears being wet. We're already in heaven, and then it says every tear will be wiped. Now, why are we crying in heaven? Well, I don't know. I think I have an idea, and I think that idea is there's this moment with God alone. Nobody else's name is mentioned. And God says, did you do what I asked you to do? And then we go, I built your orphanages. Thank you for that. That was good. Did you do what I asked you? But Lord, I made lots of money for the church. Thank you for that. Did you do what I asked you to do?
And is it that well done, good and faithful servant?
Well, that's the talents. That's the parable of the talents. I think maybe that is where I'm getting it from. But this idea of, because all they had to do, those people, I mean, it's a whole thing, but those people knew their master so well. He doesn't give them any instructions.
Yeah.
He says, I'm going away, here's your money.
Yeah.
He had trained them so well, they knew exactly what they needed to do. The first one doubles 5, so it's 10. Mm-hmm. The second one doubles 2, so it's 4. What's the difference between 4 and 10?
6.
They both get exactly the same reward.
Sure.
Well done, my good and faithful servant.
Sure.
Enter your reward. Now, the last one knew. He's not different. He got 1. What did he need to do? There was one thing he needed to do. He would have got exactly the same reward. You see, and this is what I'm talking about. There are greater and smaller callings, but none of them are better or worse.
Yeah.
And we are not perfect. And God isn't expecting us to be perfect. But what he is looking for is us moving in the general direction. And it was good for us. I get frustrated in my life. I get frustrated with God. I don't feel like God answers all my prayers. I've been struggling with sinus for like 6 months. How easy is it to heal sinus? But I love God. He's my God. I want him. I can fight with him or I can submit to him. I don't understand because I am not perfect, right? What I do have is millions of testimonies of how good he has been.
Sure.
And so I can focus on the bad or the good. And that's my choice because he isn't going to change. And when I focus on the good, I remember things and I can live through my sinus nightmare. It's okay.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to go to heaven one day. And I'm going to arrive unfinished. And that's the point of heaven. There's so much we're going to leave unaccomplished. And we're going to do it in heaven.
Yeah.
But it's a much better life. Since I've started embracing my encouragement, my gifts that led me, when I just embraced, I'm a pastor, my life has got so much better. Not perfect. I struggle. I have my issues. But man, there are these magic moments And I'm getting better at everything I'm doing. I'm way better at 53 than I was at 23.
Yeah.
And I wasn't awful there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I understand. Yeah. And I'm just thinking in heaven, if everyone is just doing what they're called to do, titles won't even matter, and
Yeah.
how big your
They
calling
don't
is
matter
matter.
now.
Yeah.
That's what I said somewhere in this talk, right? I think the highest title we will ever hold is child of God.
God.
But it matters in the sense of authority on this world and
Yeah.
and I think that's the beauty of purpose as well, is like my counseling gift was always there, but it's been trained now.
Yeah.
And I'm continue training. And I want to learn more. And so I'm a better counselor. And before I die, I will be a better counselor. And I think that is the beauty of this. When we embrace our purpose, it grows. I always think of purpose as an upside down pyramid. You start where you can.
Yeah.
You start by going, okay, I'm good at encouraging. Okay, I can only encourage 2 people a week. Do it. Next thing, purpose begets purpose. The next thing you know, those people are telling other people. Then now you've got to make some decisions. Now you've got to think, okay, where in my job can I do this? Like, I'm employed full-time in the church, a full-time minister. That's so many people's dream. It's hard, and do not take it lightly. But even in this job, I would say I'm somewhere between 75 and 79% of my job is my purpose. Because I am HOD, they make me do a budget, for example. I don't know who thought that was a good idea. That's my job, right? That's what I have to do. And so there are things I just have to do, whether I'm good at them or not. I just have to figure out the skill and do it. And that's part of life.
Yeah.
But the greatest part of my job is my purpose, is doing the stuff, is encouraging, caring for people, being there for people, having difficult conversations with people.
Sure.
And it's not always fun. Purpose isn't always fun. Because of my purpose, I have to have some very tough conversations. And I get embroiled in things that I don't want to be involved in. And every time, even when it's really bad, I learn. I'm better. I'm going to be better for the next person going through something like that, because now I've experienced it.
Sure.
And so there has to be suffering. If there's not suffering, you're not growing, you're not changing, and your faith is dying. I honestly believe it. And we shouldn't be suffering all the time. It shouldn't just be suffering. Amazing. And your day should be a weird, complex mix of suffering and joy. Yeah. That's what it should be. Because there is joy in the journey. God is not a taskmaster.
Yeah.
I think the best thing to do is to, if young people are listening to this, how do you find your purpose? Well, think about what is the most common compliment you get. Think about, what are you passionate about? What do you see in the world that other people don't see?
What burdens you?
That's it.
What grieves you?
Yeah. What makes you really happy?
Yeah.
And then begin to see what are the similarities.
Absolutely.
And start figuring out, actually, when I do this, people respond well. Let's do a bit more of it. Whether it's your job or not, don't worry about that now.
Just
once you figured out what it is, you can find jobs that will allow you to do that.
Yeah.
Or you can, in your generation, you're going to figure out how to monetize the thing you do best.
Yeah. Sure. On that note, I just want to share a struggle that someone sent to us.
Sure.
And he says that one of my biggest struggles with identity pertains to how I view myself in respect of others. Since a very young age, I felt as though I don't measure up. I'm not mature enough, and other feelings that have at times almost convicted me that there's something deeply wrong with me. His use of conviction here as a word is interesting, but he then says, these feelings of inadequacy have fueled many unhealthy behavioral traits, such as constantly seeking approval from others, constantly seeking to impress others, and even deriving pleasure and fulfillment from being seen with people I believe rank highly in some instance or in some sense of popularity. I've been called out on many occasions over the years. At some stage, a friend of mine even delivered a prophetic word about how I seem to trade in attention from those who genuinely love me, and perceive for me attention from, and I think he's trying to say that he trades that attention that he gets from the people who are popular. He trades it in exchange for the genuine attention and affection.
Yeah, so he'd rather have the popular than the people who are actually in his life.
Basically. And so he'd rather get attention from people who he says, from those I deem as popular or cool, but in actual fact, these are the same people who view me as weird. And so that's his struggle.
Yeah, and I think that's a common struggle, right? So I think what we haven't spoken about is the absolute necessity of healing. You can't embrace your purpose if you don't love yourself to a certain degree, right? And loving yourself is about the fact that I am worthy. And it becomes this weird thing in Christianity, but when psychologically, when we talk about worthiness, and I'm define it both, is if God created you with a need to love, if being loved is part of your optimal environment that helps you thrive and do well, he would be a very evil God if he then never created love.
Sure.
So God created us to be loved, which means we are worthy of being loved. Okay, we are not worthy in the sense of we've arrived and we've achieved. That's not what I'm saying. But take it even more, like God created us to breathe air.
In the absence of air,
we die. So we are worthy of air. And so when stuff in our lives and our childhood, and I mean, let's be honest, I mean, the levels of abuse in this country are off the charts, right? And nobody's perfect. Nobody's parents are perfect. Lots of good parents, lots of loving parents out there, but nobody's perfect. And so when we come to Jesus, we have to pursue healing. And it doesn't happen automatically because it has to be by faith.
And it's not easy either.
And also because God is after relationship.
Yeah.
You see, we want the shortest shortcuts. And I preach about this often. I'm like, you don't want to read your Bible so the pastor must tell you. You don't want to know what God says so the prophet must tell you. We're outsource our faith.
Yeah.
Then we wonder why we're frustrated in God and why we're sinning all the time. Because we don't know who he is. Yeah. Because we don't want to. We're not interested. But healing, you can't fulfill your full purpose if you're broken. And we're all broken.
Yeah.
And we'll never be fully healed.
Yeah.
But the healing journey in my life that's where the purpose manifested. And so there has to be humility. And so counseling, going for good counseling, going for good professional counseling. There are so many professionals who are Christian. There are so many Christian professionals.
Yeah.
There's a slight difference, but like just owning. And for me, this young man feels like there's been brokenness in his life because that's every one of us. It's a sliding scale of intensity.
Yeah.
And when we're broken, we're going to look for love in the wrong places. I mean, I was very codependent in my late teens, early 20s, and it destroyed all my relationships. And I hated myself. And eventually, I found a book about codependency and it defined it. And suddenly I was like, oh my word, gosh, that's my problem.
Yeah.
And then I had started speaking to people and shame. People were very patient with me and I didn't deserve that. And I'm sure I was awful, but through their intervention, through prayer, through me realizing, through God, and then I had choices to make.
Yeah.
And so in a very real sense, I'm a recovering codependent because there are these moments, life, you don't get everything you want in life. You don't get all the love you want in life. And now for me, it's just that simple thing of like, why do I only speak to this person, right? Is it because I'm needy and I'm hoping they're going to fix it for me?
Yeah.
And sometimes I still speak to the person, but my whole attitude has changed. I'm like honest. I just say, oh, I'm feeling a bit lonely tonight. And then we just have a natural chat. Or they say, I'm sorry, I couldn't do it on Friday. I'm like, yeah, that's great.
Yeah, sure.
But those feelings still come, the little provocation to act like that.
Yeah, because we all have a proclivity to do certain things because of our past.
Totally.
Yeah.
But if we don't get healed, put more pain into the world. And then we create weird things. Ourselves. Yeah, and pain for ourselves. And we end up lonely and unloved.
Yeah.
And that's awful. And nobody deserves that.
Yeah.
We are worthy of love. We are worthy of our purpose. We are worthy of other people. But we have to do the work that we need to do it. And so healing is vastly, and I mean, that's why you've been sitting on this couch crying, is because you've needed to heal.
Absolutely.
And you've figured out some of those spaces. And it's a journey.
Yeah.
It's a continual journey. I mean, what I can tell you is like, as a 53-year-old, is every decade, it's not that my purpose, I'm still encouraged that, but vehicles change. Like, and vehicles are important. Like music could be a vehicle for me to minister and whatever, but it was for that season. But what also starts happening is I discover other skills. I discover new passions. I discover new insights.
Yeah.
I'm fundamentally still me, and my purpose is fundamentally the same. But how I'm expressing it, the depth, things are changing. There are new passions that come into life that I didn't know existed before.
So it's dynamic.
It's dynamic.
And being married to one thing can cause frustration.
Yes, if you're not allowing it to morph. And also, we're not just one thing.
Yeah.
That's why I'm saying, like, I boil it down to encouragement, but there's also wisdom. There's also some kind of spirituality. There's also joy. I'm very funny.
Yeah.
I think I'm very funny. I
I
don't know if
think so
anybody
too.
else does. And I love laughing. And laughter
Yeah.
is a gift in my life. Laughter has been a way I've healed and changed. And I want to bring that to people. And sometimes I'm even a little inappropriate by professional standards because I make people laugh on this couch over really horrific things. But I can do that.
True story. Yeah.
You may have experienced that. Like really bad things. Like in other contexts, I would just be like re-abusing the person, but because of who I am. And so when I say one thing, I mean in a very nuanced space, you know. And so real encouragement in this thing is, again, just embrace who you are. Stop trying to be something.
Yeah.
And if you're building yourself on somebody else's identity, oh my word. And we will do that a little bit. It's okay. Maybe all of us have to, so we realize. But let's realize sooner than later.
Yeah. And sooner.
Yeah, because there's enough pain and suffering in the world without us still.
Less pain.
Yeah.
If you realize sooner. Yeah. Sure. And I think it's amazing how this just relates to how I'm even sitting on this couch today from a different perspective now. And I'm just thinking of, it wasn't overnight, like you said, it was countless counseling bookings to the point where you were like, I think we've done enough now. Be senior professional.
I've reached my purchase limit.
You kicked me out of counseling, Pastor Greg. And yeah, I mean, I found a therapist that she's actually a Christian therapist, and she's very awesome. Amazing, very strict.
So you can recommend it.
She definitely. She literally threatened to fire me as a client if I don't do my homework, because she's like, well, then it's pointless if you come here. She's like, you know, she's serious. But I really enjoy how she's managed to even get me at the feet of Jesus now, because she's like, you need to pray through this, you know, regardless. And it speaks to the shortcut, you know, that we like to take. And I was just reading this morning. It's funny how everything is all of a sudden interlinked. But I was reading John 6 this morning, and it's the passage of scripture from, I think it's verse 29 or 30 to like 30, I can't remember, but around that area. And these people are asking Jesus for a sign that he's, you know, he's the Messiah, he's been sent. And he's like, no, I'm actually not going to do that, you know. And they're like, but Moses gave us a sign that he's from God. He sent manna. He made us get manna. And Jesus corrects them. He's like, no, actually God gave them the manna. Yeah. It wasn't Moses. Moses didn't do it, you know. So if you guys want this bread of life that you say you truly want, it's actually going to come in relationship with this God that you're trying to run away from. And I think a lot of me growing in my identity is me being thrown literally into the sea of God's love. And I'm like, I've been trying to escape this. I really didn't want to do this. He was the worst person to me. And in some areas, I have to be honest, I'm still trying to comprehend how he's still a good God. Absolutely. You know? So working through that, through counseling and therapy, has been really pivotal for me, because now I'm shocked that I'm reading the Bible now.
Well done. I'm so impressed. I'm so excited.
I didn't want to, you know, so I'm just like, oh man, okay, so we're doing this and I'm enjoying it, and it's been amazing. And
so good. Yeah.
Like you said, even this podcast is birthed out of this counseling and therapy healing journey. And it's also speaks to the recent teaching we had at church about gifts, and how you phrased it really, like, it spoke to the core of my heart, because it's like, if Jesus walked in and gave me a bag of dirt.
You stole my story. Yeah.
You know, if Jesus walked in and gave me a bag of dirt, I'd probably put it in one of those fancy cabinets in the house, because it's dirt.
You'd suddenly become all Catholic. Yes, and there would be like lights and incense.
Jesus dirt. You know, this is the dirt, you know.
The dirt of God.
Exactly. And that's how I've seen my gifting, you know, the gift of leadership, the gift of teaching. That's how I've seen, they've always been dirt and unworthy to me. But as soon as I had that perspective, it was so like, amazing. Well, if we're going to teach and we're going to start a podcast and teach, and, you know, that's literally it. And
embracing your purpose.
Embracing it. And it's not easy. I think I'm still growing into it, but it's something I thoroughly enjoy. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, I'm
thank
so
you
glad for you and
so,
well
so
done. And I
much.
mean, I've watched you grow. And just for anybody listening, this is the point. We grow. We're never going to be perfect,
Yeah.
but we can grow.
Yeah.
And it can get better.
Yeah.
You know, and you're way more joyful
than I've been. That
than
is
when we
true.
started, right? And that's fruit. That's what the fruit looks like. And you're doing this thing. And even the purpose, other people are listening to this and
Sure.
they're benefiting. That's the point.
Yeah.
People.
Yeah.
Right? So well done.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Pastor Greg. I really appreciate
Only a pleasure.
your time, and
Yeah.
we're really blessed to have had you here.
Absolutely.
I hope everyone really takes something out of this, and if there's anyone struggling, I just really hope it speaks to them, and you know,
Amen.
they're also pushed
Yeah.
to come to God.
Absolutely. So, Lord,
You know?
we pray for every person listening to this who's
Amen.
struggling in their identity and their purpose, Lord. Help them to stop striving. Help them to just embrace who you are in their life, who they are in you, and help them to find the thing you put inside of them, because every one of them has something straight from your heart.
Yeah.
And you long for that thing back out of them, Lord God. So bless them. And everybody who's trying to compare themselves to everybody, Jesus, help them to stop that.
Yeah.
You do not compare us to each other ever, because you know us inside out. So bless everyone listening. Bless them with purpose. Bless them with identity. Bless them with an understanding of their calling and how much you are a part of it. In Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. So that's the end of the show, guys. Thank you so much for listening. I hope this impacted you. If you want to keep listening to the rest of our conversation, please do follow us on Instagram at EdenRest_ZAR. You can also learn more about us at edenrest.co.za. That's our website. And we are also on Spotify, YouTube, as well as I forget the other one, Apple Podcasts. So you can also tune into the conversation there. And like I said, I hope this really impacted you guys, and I pray that you know, you get to find yourselves, and whatever you're wrestling with, you bring it to God. Thank you so much for tuning in.